Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we have ourselves a track from an act named Tim Gawert titled There I Will Be. And if we switch over to here we have ourselves the track on Spotify. And we're going to listen through this track from start till finish. And we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. It's nice to come in with the keys. Very cool response between the middle and sides of the stereo field.
Where I may go, there I will be. Whatever comes, I know I'll be free to let go of all things I can't control. With you by my side, there's nothing I can do.
I think it's a really charming track so far. We've got guitars as the main input, some keys earlier on, and the vocals being a focal point with some shakers as well. It's a nice friendly combination of elements. His voice in the upper register stands out and has a great presence to it. And the story so far about going through life's various tribulations and having faith in it because that person is there beside them, it's heartwarming.
Loving you here is all I'll ever need. So where I may go, there I will be.
So we're going for an old school ballad kind of format. It's a big project. With vocal overdubs in the background adding a nice sense of airiness to it.
Where I may go, there I will be. Whatever comes, I will be free. No turning back, no mysteries. It's time to be what we will be. Time is running out. Tell me, are you here and are you now? I know a place we can go anytime. The wheels are turning and your life is on the line. Where I may go, there I will be. Whatever comes, I will be free. No turning back, no mysteries. It's time to be what we will be.
Great variety with the Tom fills, some lead passages on the guitars. Great phrasing there. Bring it into the high ranges at a later date. And then the organ as well. Excellent.
Where I may go, there I will be. Whatever comes, I will be free. No turning back, no mysteries. It's time to be what we will be.
I have a feeling this is going to be a positive review. Interesting, unexpected chord to finish on. Wasn't expecting us to resolve like that, but I kind of like that we're not going straight for that route. Ah.
Where I may go, there I will be.
Interesting. I think there's quite a few positive things to say about this, but we'll say that for the conclusion. And welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from Tim Gawert. It's titled There I Will Be. Now, what do I think this track is about? I would surmise that this track is about someone that is growing up through their life as an adult, exploring possibilities, the opportunities that are presented. You know, they're saying that they're going to reliably be where they need to be, where they exist, and while they might have that person next to them, the cards are going to fall what may, and it's going to be a positive experience. And you get that from the overall experience of the track, you know, throughout listening to the performance of the instruments and everything like that, as well as the vocal performance and all that. But it kind of invokes a sense of nostalgia with the production style, but we'll get into that in a moment. I just want to say the story at its heart seems very heartfelt and genuine and authentic, and there were no rough edges with it. There was no unnecessarily vitriolic or violent stuff going on to try and sort of topsy-turvy the mood of it. It was very sweet the whole way through, and I appreciated that. I think that the vocal performance from Tim here was stellar. I'm stoked with the way we approached it. I don't think that we needed to do anything differently. I think that with a song like this, you really need to make sure that if you're going for that old-timey kind of combination of the organs, guitar, bass, and drums, and it's going to sound like it's just gone done to an analog disc and everything like that, you need a vocal style from that era to really make it last, like the acoustic, folk, classic rock ballad kind of combination. And I think the beauty of having the song structured the way it was is that it allowed Tim to explore his possibilities and be flexible with his approaches in various sections, you know. We're a little bit softer in the intro parts and then the outro sections with the Where I Will Be bits, but then as opposed to the center where things became a bit bigger with the drum fills and the guitar solos and all that. And I like that. I think that was great to have that variety there. It makes it more interesting to listen to, especially in a track that is longer than the 2 to 4 minute sweet spot I usually appreciate for reviews. But yeah, if we're going to look at the track outside of the vocals, where the singing it showed great vocal technique, we were comfortable with the melodies and the hook lines that we chose without overplaying them or having them past the use by date. We sang in a way which sounded like we both cared about what we were singing about and were trying to have a gentle conversation with the listener, and that was appropriate for the subject matter. And I don't really think that we needed to do anything differently there. I think we harmonized all the rest of the elements of the mix, and it sounded like something that could probably be commercial grade, you know, depending on the amount of exposure it gets, and I hope that this does get attention because it's a great song. In addition to that, yeah, at over 4 minutes, I think we needed to have the interesting structure we had where there was like a softer, more acoustic section with a bit of bass in there, but it was predominantly just guitars, the keys to kind of go in and out. We had the drums come in as more of a forefront in the middle section there, which was a bit more bombastic. But then we had that fantastic use of the bell curve where things were kind of lower energy-wise at the start, then they went up, and they came back down there. It was a great choice. No complaints about that whatsoever. Made for a compelling 3-parter, and it was satisfying to roll through it. And it was unexpected to go back to that original motif at the end, but then somehow I think it also makes sense to do that. But it's also just the attention to detail of the various instruments that made it sort of like compelling to listen through the entire time. Like we started with the fingerstyle guitars, and, you know, we had some really relatively gentle broken chord arpeggios going on there. Well, not broken chords, we're more sort of messing with intervals, weren't we? Major, minor intervals. With the cute little smooth, leadish, lightly crispy, distorted parts on the sides, they were very smooth there and colorful in their mid to high range there. They contrasted well between the different textures for the strings. The keys predominantly sat amongst either low notes fading in and out with the automation of the volume, or we were rolling with some major or minor progressions there that allowed us to sort of fill in the mid-range and pair nicely with anything the guitars were doing there, whether they were clean or distorted. The shakers were a nice way of maintaining a sub-level kind of groove, moving the song forward, but at a very, very kind of like chilled out, relaxed pace. Very intimate. And then the bass line when it did come in was either very kind of like well controlled, and it was more of a kind of like just a acknowledgement that a lower area of the frequency spectrum needs to be looked at to enforce the root notes as like a unison device. Or in the middle sections where things were a bit louder, we came in and we really sort of solidified that ground floor there. The drums that we had coming into that middle section, it was great to establish some 8th and 16th note grooves that are a bit more sort of prominent than what we had previously due to a relative lack of percussion there. But I think Tim Gawert basically started playing the drum set. I think that was one of their first instruments, if I'm not mistaken. So it's no surprise to me that we feature the drums, but at the same time, I think it's great that we knew to not necessarily start with the drums. It can be a little bit too obvious for someone who is a drummer and who has got their own sort of solo project going to then focus on that as their main instrument. It can be great to focus on other instruments to sort of, as a pleasant surprise for the listener. But I think that was well handled. And it was clear that we could play from the 16th note fill that came in before that guitar solo there, which was fascinating as well, but just it showed finesse and tightness on the kit with the grooves. The lead guitars, when they came in either on the sides in the intro and outro sections there, or in that solo bit in the middle part, was lovely. We didn't overplay, we pocketed a little bit. I think that was important as well, because I just think that while we had the ability, I think, to explore the fretboard a bit more than that, and maybe be a little bit more sort of like spicy with the phrasings and choices there, I think that we were respectful to the existing grooves and patterns within the track itself, either through the vocal lines, the way they phrased things, or the other guitar, bass, drum, and sort of key riffs that we had up until that point. And we kind of flirted with notes within the scale range, but we didn't want to sort of go too high until the second half. But even then, we reiterated the motif phrasing that we had at the start. It was very, very a very practical solo. We didn't try to do too many things absolutely out of the box, and I think that was a smart thing, because you didn't necessarily need to make it too alienating for a listener, especially if people are into this kind of music. They don't necessarily want something too ridiculous or jarring their technique wise. Yeah, sure, have a little bit of flaunt and flex a little bit, but I think the amount of restraint we showed in that section was good. And for it to then roll into an organ solo, which was equally technical, yet sounded it was such a breath of fresh air after the guitars, bass, and drums. I think that was part of the reason why we maybe saved the tone until that point. We saved that texture and really put it to the forefront, and it was a great way of sort of averting expectations. It had call and response, like lots of different interesting ideas with the various instruments up until that point. So it wasn't like people were disinterested, but then adding a further new element there to the mix to kind of elevate things further is a phenomenal choice. And I think beyond that, we got to our ceiling, and that's when I think we decided to maybe start coming down after that a little bit back to the end of that bell curve with the reiteration of what we had initially. So it was, the performances were good across the wide range of instruments there. The frequency spectrum of stereo field was well explored even before post-production. It just sounds like it's a really tight performance. It sounded like it was recorded live, and I'm very, very happy with that. I don't think there was a note out of place. And the motif itself sounded almost grandiose in that midsection, very low-key at the start. It kind of reflected the range maybe that Tim was going to have with their life. Wherever they go, they were going to have high and low points, but I think the reason that all of it was basically quite majorish sounding was that he felt hope for it regardless. Even if there are big sections or small parts, he knew things were going to be okay, and that's what the motif said to me. So I think that was the aim. That was a great choice, and I wish them the best of luck with future compositions, because this is dope. And then finally, studio recording, mixing, and mastering was great. I'm really happy with how they handled it. I think that the vocals had a great presence, not only because of Tim's vocal range, but also because of the fact that everything else was well balanced within the frequency spectrum and the stereo field. The vocals in that high range have a bit more presence anyways, because there's a bit more focus on the lows, with a lot of it in the mid-range up until the high points of the guitars. So that was cool. And even if we had like the automated like volume of like the whoa, the keys occasionally fading in or fading out, it's that never interfered with his range. So yeah, he was solid there. There wasn't a whole lot of effects processing on his voice as well. It sounded kind of dry, and I think that made it seem a little bit more sort of real, if that makes sense. It didn't seem like he needed to sort of polish it up. It was captured well, a good take. The drums, bass, guitars, everything else had great presence there without being too clean or sanitized. Everything was niched well. Things were glued quite well. There was definitely compression there, but there was still dynamic range there, and things didn't need to be squeezed too much. In fact, there was phenomenal use of dynamic range for things going back and forth, like the call and response between the mid and vocals, and then the side guitars and all that. And I just think, even though things were leveled well and there was dynamic range, it was still nice and loud. So, there with the bus compression on the master chain and limiting was good as well. I mean, effectively, this is my review of this track from Tim Gawert titled There I'll Be, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us some love via the various social medias and Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as either how more than ever thought crazy stuff going in the world, and I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.